What if the creator of the universe didn't make the world out of love?
Yeah.
Or like out of some grand peaceful design, but out of a desperate cosmic panic attack?
Yeah, I mean, it completely shatters the image we usually have of a divine creator, doesn't it? We're so accustomed to picturing the absolute as this flawless mathematical sphere of light.
Right. Something resting in total equilibrium.
Exactly. A foundation of reality that is solid, unchanging, and just perfectly at peace.
Because we want reality to feel stable, you know?
Yeah.
We want to believe that if you dig deep enough into the universe, underneath all the chaos and the pain and the noise of our daily lives, you eventually hit a bedrock of serene perfection.
Right, we want that safety net.
But today, we're going to look at an idea that violently upends that comforting thought. We're doing a deep dive into a notoriously difficult, unfinished manuscript from 1813.
Yes. Ages of the World by the German idealist philosopher F.W.J. von Schelling.
Yeah, and we're looking at it through the lens of a modern essay by Slavoj Žižek called The Abyss of Freedom.
Which is, frankly, an incredibly ambitious pairing. I mean, Schelling was trying to map out the very architecture of God before the creation of the universe.
Just a casual, light topic for a Tuesday.
Exactly. And Žižek takes that dense 19th century theology and argues that it is actually, well, the ultimate cheat code for understanding modern human psychology.
So to make this accessible, I am coming into this deep dive looking at it from a theological and everyday human perspective. Like, I'll play the role of the inquisitive student here.
And I think that's the best way to tackle it.
Because if God is fundamentally divided, if the universe was born out of a profound tension, how does that actually apply to the choices you and I make? Why do we self-sabotage? Why does reality so often feel unbearable?
And I will bring in the philosophical and psychoanalytic framework to explain the mechanics of that. I'll be the philosophy professor in this scenario. Because to understand why a modern human being feels paralyzed by, say, a career choice, or why they find themselves trapped in destructive habits, we really have to understand Schelling's claim about what is hiding inside the heart of God.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right there with this radical thesis that God is not a uniform, perfect entity.
Right.
For someone listening who hasn't spent years studying 19th century German idealism, which is probably most of us, we have to define the two fundamental forces that set up this entire cosmic drama.
Yes. Schelling divides the absolute into two concepts, existence and the ground.
Okay. Existence and ground.
To grasp this, we need to strip away our standard definitions of those words. In Schelling's framework, God is not a monolithic unity. There's a primal split.
A split right down the middle.
Well, more like an internal tension. Let's look at the first term, existence. You can think of this as the fully actualized, expressive part of God.
The part that acts.
Exactly. This is the light of reason, the word, the logos.
Mhm.
It is God as meaning, as order, as an expansive, articulated reality that wants to reach out and create.
Okay, so that is the recognizable part. Like when we talk about a divine creator speaking the universe into being in traditional theology, we are talking about existence, the intellect, the light.
Spot on. But for that existence to actually become something real, Schelling argues it requires a foundation that is fundamentally not it.
Meaning the ground.
Yes. This is the second term, the ground.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really strange. The ground is the obscure, impenetrable, pre-ontological foundation of God.
Wait, pre-ontological, let's just define that real quick.
Right.
Ontology is the study of being, right? Of what actually exists.
Right.
So if something is pre-ontological, it means it's the raw material before it even gets to be called a thing.
That is a great way to put it. Imagine the dense, formless clay before the sculptor has even conceptualized a statue. The ground is this dense, dark matter of divinity.
Wow, dark matter of divinity. I like that.
Schelling characterizes it as a contractive force, a heavy, pulling, inward-sinking gravity. It is the absolute opposite of the expansive light of reason.
So you're saying there is something inside God that actively resists God?
Yes. Schelling's radical claim is that God is not fully himself. He cannot attain full self-identity.
That's wild.
In order to exist, God needs this foreign body, this dense, impenetrable ground lodged in his very heart. The ground actively opposes the expansive light. It pulls inward, darkly, refusing to be illuminated, while reason desperately tries to shine outward.
Okay, throwing a flag on the play here, putting on my theologian hat for a second.
Go for it.
How can God, the absolute, be imperfect? I mean, the very definition of divine perfection is wholeness, right? A lack of division.
According to classical theology, yes.
So if God has a dark, resistant, rebellious force inside him, doesn't that just mean God is flawed?
Schelling anticipates that exact objection, actually, and his counterargument shifts the entire paradigm of how we understand perfection. He argues that the perfect actually needs the imperfect to assert itself. True completeness isn't just the absence of imperfection.
Oh, interesting.
Think about an empty white room. It has no flaws, no dirt, no imperfections, but it also has no features. It is a void.
It's just nothingness.
Right. For Schelling, completeness is the tension, the unity of both the perfect and the imperfect. The perfect requires the stubborn resistance of the imperfect to become actualized, to have something to push against.
That makes me think of a concept in physics, actually.
Yeah.
Imagine a completely frictionless surface.
Wait, I'm tracking.
Mathematically, a frictionless surface is perfect. It is flawless. But if you actually try to use it, it is a nightmare.
Because you can't get any grip.
Exactly. You can't walk on it because you would just slip forever. You can't build a house on it. A car's tires can't grip it to drive. For the surface to actually be functional, for a living being to interact with it and move forward, it requires the flaw of friction.
That's a perfect analogy.
Total perfection, like total smoothness, is practically useless for any living, acting being, even God.
Yes. The ground is the divine friction. Without that dense, contractive stuff to push against, the light of reason would just dissipate into a frictionless void. It would have no traction.
You need something to catch on.
Exactly. The light needs the darkness to be visible. The expansive word needs the heavy silence to have meaning. But because this friction is built into the very core of the absolute, it means the foundation of reality is inherently unstable.
And Schelling uses this to explain a massive theological problem, right? The problem of evil.
He does, and it's a brilliant move. In traditional theology, evil is often treated as a mere absence of good, or maybe just a human mistake.
Like a shadow, just a lack of light.
Right. But for Schelling, evil is an ontological possibility built into the fabric of God himself.
Because of the friction.
Exactly. Because God has this dark ground inside him, this contractive, self-enclosed force, there is always the risk that this lower principle will rebel.
It could try to take over.
Yes. Evil emerges when the ground stops being the humble foundation and tries to usurp the leading role, overpowering the light of reason. Evil is this dark friction turning into a destructive fury.
Man, if God has this heavy, contracted friction fighting against the expansive light inside him, what does that internal conflict actually feel like or look like?
It's terrifying.
Because Schelling paints a picture of this pre-creation state that is incredibly violent, right? It leads us directly into what he calls the rotary motion of drives.
Yeah, we are talking now about the state of God before the beginning, before the word was spoken.
So pre-universe.
Right. This prehistory of God is not some blissful eternity. Žižek, channeling Schelling, describes it as a chaotic, psychotic universe of blind drives.
Which is a terrifying phrase. A chaotic, psychotic universe of blind drives is the bedrock of everything.
It really is. Picture the two wills we just discussed. The contractive will of the ground is pulling everything inward, swallowing everything into a dense singularity.
Like a black hole.
Yes. And the expansive will of existence is trying to break out, to articulate and create. But before there is a conscious word to organize them, these two wills are locked in a mechanical death match.
Just grinding against each other.
Endlessly. Every single attempt by the expansive will to open up immediately collapses back into the contractive void. It's an endless, pulsating, agonizing rotation.
You know when a car is stuck in neutral, but the driver is just slamming the gas pedal to the floor.
Oh, that's a great visual.
The engine is redlining, screaming, generating immense heat and violent vibration. But the car isn't moving an inch forward. It is just tearing itself apart with internal friction. That is what this rotary motion sounds like to me. Massive energy, zero progression.
That is exactly it. And the heat generated by that redlining engine is what Schelling calls divine anxiety.
God experiences anxiety.
Profound anxiety. Schelling explicitly defines anxiety as the experience of simultaneously being unable to close yourself off from the world and being unable to open yourself up to it. You are caught in the rotary motion.
Stuck in the middle.
Right. Schelling uses this brutal metaphor. He says God, in this state, is like a trapped animal desperately striving to disengage from a snare. But every spring forward only tightens the trap.
Wow.
God repeatedly dashes against his own wall in a state of wild madness, tearing itself apart.
A trapped animal tearing itself apart.
Yeah.
When you map that onto human experience, the closest thing I can think of is severe creative tension.
I mean,
Well, imagine a writer or an artist who has a massive, overwhelming buildup of chaotic emotions and ideas. That is the ground, right? The contraction. It's churning, it feels physical, it hurts.
Yes, the raw, unformed material.
But they cannot express it onto the canvas. They haven't found the specific brushstroke, the word that will release it.
I see.
So they just sit there, paralyzed, cycling between the desperate drive to let it out and the crushing inability to articulate it. It feels like madness.
The artist is experiencing a microcosm of the divine madness right there. They are caught in the rotary motion of drive.
Trying to break out of the snare.
Exactly. And the moment the brush finally hits the canvas, that is the pronunciation of the word. That action breaks the rotary cycle. It takes all that chaotic, swirling energy and linearizes it into a progression, a narrative, a painting.
We experience this in everyday moral choices, too. I want you, the listener, to really visualize this in your own life.
Very relatable.
Think about a time you were paralyzed by a massive life decision. Maybe quitting a stable but miserable job or leaving a long-term relationship. You experience this exact rotary motion.
The push and pull.
You cycle between the drive to stay safe, to pull inward, to contract, and the drive to take a risk, to grow, to expand. You spin and spin, tearing yourself apart with anxiety, losing sleep, redlining your mental engine without making a single move until you finally make a choice.
And Schelling takes that deeply intimate human feeling of being stuck, of being torn apart by conflicting drives, and elevates it to the level of cosmology.
The universe was born out of a panic attack.
Basically, yes. The universe itself was born from the exact same paralysis. But understanding that moment, the moment of breaking the cycle and speaking the word, requires us to look at how Schelling fundamentally changed philosophy.
Because he's often called the vanishing mediator of German idealism, right?
Yes, that's the term Žižek uses for him.
Why vanishing? My understanding of the history here is that Schelling was kind of pushed out of the spotlight. Like he was writing in the shadow of G.W.F. Hegel, and a lot of his contemporaries thought he'd just lost his mind and regressed into weird religious mysticism.
That's fairly accurate. During his later life, Schelling was heavily marginalized. The philosophical establishment in the 19th century was obsessed with reason, logic, and the neat, rational unfolding of history.
Which was very much Hegel's territory.
Exactly. Hegel was the superstar. So when Schelling comes along talking about God's anxiety, dark grounds, and trapped animals, they dismissed him as a theosophical crackpot.
They thought he was doing theology, not philosophy.
They thought he was making up fairy tales about God's inner life instead of doing serious philosophical rigor.
But Žižek vehemently argues otherwise. He sees Schelling as the secret key to everything that came after him.
Žižek argues that Schelling is the essential hidden bridge. By identifying this crack in the absolute, this gap between existence and ground, this madness at the core of reality, Schelling actually designated a unique space that made all of later modern philosophy possible.
Really? How so?
Well, without Schelling's dark ground, you don't get Karl Marx's theories of human alienation. You don't get Arthur Schopenhauer's concept of the blind, irrational will.
Because they all rely on this underlying chaotic force.
Exactly. You don't get Friedrich Nietzsche, and you certainly don't get modern existentialism. Schelling vanished from the mainstream, but his ideas secretly mediated the transition into the modern era.
And he does this by completely reversing how we normally think about freedom, right?
That's his most brilliant move.
If you take a philosophy 101 class, the big puzzle about freedom is always determinism. The professor asks, how can we possibly have free will in a universe that is strictly governed by cause and effect?
Right. We assume the universe is a clockwork machine.
And we have to figure out how human choice miraculously fits into those gears.
The classic Enlightenment problem. We assume order is the default and freedom is the exception.
But Schelling flips the entire board over.
He tells us we are asking the wrong question entirely. The real question is not how we can be free in a world of chains. The real question is, how did the world ever get caught in the chains of reason and cause and effect in the first place?
Oh, wow.
Because the primordial state of reality isn't a neat clockwork mechanism. The primordial state is the chaotic, psychotic abyss of blind drives.
The rotary motion.
Yes. Freedom in the sense of this wild, groundless, untethered abyss isn't the exception to the rule. Freedom is the chaos that birthed the rule.
That completely reorganizes how you view reality. The laws of physics, the order of the universe, our social structures, they aren't the baseline.
Not at all.
They're just the structures that manage to contain the original madness. They are the words spoken to stop the rotary motion.
This leads to a crucial concept regarding what a philosophical system actually is.
Okay, break that down for me.
For a system to be truly total and complete, it cannot just be a neat, harmonious hierarchy where everything makes logical sense. A true system must include its own inversion.
It has to account for its own breakdown.
Exactly. The lower principle, the dark, chaotic ground, must temporarily usurp the higher principle of reason for reality to actually become actualized.
So the universe only exists because God's internal order was violently perverted, because the dark friction forced its way into the light.
Yes. Without that perversion, there's just a frictionless, unactualized void.
Okay, if this divine madness, this chaotic inversion of logic, birthed the universe, how does it manifest in the human mind today?
This is where we get into psychoanalysis.
Because I don't wake up feeling like a chaotic God containing the abyss of freedom. I wake up worrying about my electric bill or wondering why I procrastinate so much or stressing about a weird text message.
Right, the mundane neuroses of daily life.
Exactly. So this is where Žižek brings in the heavy machinery, right?
Žižek views Schelling's text as the absolute pinnacle of German idealism, precisely because it maps so flawlessly onto Lacanian psychoanalysis.
Okay, Lacan, the notoriously difficult French psychoanalyst.
Yes, but we'll keep it grounded. Žižek argues that this divine split, this madness of the rotary drives, is the exact blueprint for human subjectivity. To understand this, we have to look at what Hegel called the night of the world.
The night of the world, another beautifully dark phrase from German idealism.
They were very good at naming things. Žižek links the night of the world directly to Schelling's ground. We often think that becoming a human being, developing a mind and a personality, starts with peacefully observing your environment and learning to interact with it.
Like a baby just soaking in the world.
Right. But psychoanalytically, subjectivity begins with a violent, radical withdrawal from reality.
Well, withdrawal.
It is a severing of your links with your immediate environment. You pull back into your own dark internal contraction. Žižek argues that this withdrawal, which is functionally equivalent to madness, is not a regression to an animal state. It is the founding gesture of humanization.
Wait, I need to make sure I'm following this. Are you saying that madness or neurosis is our default baseline?
I am.
That every single human being is at their core fundamentally insane?
Yes. Žižek sees the divine split as the exact model for human neurosis. At our core is this night of the world, this abyss of radical, unmoored freedom and chaotic drives.
And we're terrified by it.
We are terrified by it, just as God was terrified by the rotary motion of the snare. The sheer intensity of our own unstructured drives is too much to bear.
So what do we do about it?
We cure ourselves of this foundational madness by projecting a symbolic universe onto reality.
Okay, let's define symbolic universe for the listener, because that's a big Lacanian term.
In Lacanian psychoanalysis, the symbolic order is the network of language, laws, culture, social norms, and meaning that we use to navigate the world. It is the structure we impose on reality to make it make sense.
So when a child learns to speak, they enter the symbolic order.
Exactly. They trade the chaotic madness for structured language.
So all the things we consider normal, going to school, following traffic laws, using language, caring about social status, that is just a substitute formation.
Pretty much.
It's a structure we build specifically to repress the chaotic madness that sits at our core. Normalcy is just regulated madness.
It is the word spoken to quiet the rotary drives. And this brings us to one of the most difficult but vital concepts in Lacanian psychoanalysis, which Žižek uses to tie this all together. Jouissance.
Jouissance, the French word that always pops up in these discussions and causes a massive amount of confusion.
It roughly translates to enjoyment, but if you think of it as just having a good time, you will completely misunderstand it.
Right. It's not like enjoying a day at the beach.
Not at all. Jouissance is a filthy, excessive, almost painful pleasure. It is a pleasure that goes so far it becomes unbearable. To understand how it connects to Schelling, we have to look at how we experience reality.
Okay, let's do that.
We tend to think of reality as an obstacle to our desires. Reality is the thing that says no to what we want. It's inert, it's dense, it's stubborn. Žižek, channeling Schelling, says that reality is fundamentally ugly.
Ugly. We are talking about aesthetics here, right? Like an ugly painting.
No, we are talking topologically. In mathematics, topology studies the properties of space. Žižek says an object is topologically ugly when it is in the wrong place, when its inside is larger than its outside.
Its inside is larger than its outside. That sounds like a geometry puzzle that just breaks your brain.
It does break your brain.
Like a house that looks tiny from the street, but when you walk through the front door, it's a massive, endless cavern.
Yeah.
It violently violates the rules of space.
Exactly. An object is ugly when its raw material existence exceeds our ability to symbolize it or understand it. It is too much.
It's excessive.
And this dense, impenetrable, ugly stuff of reality is the materialization of jouissance. What shouldn't be there, the obstacle that constantly hinders our desire, is this excessive, unbearable presence.
I want to ground this in a real-world analogy, because this is where the distinction between desire and drive becomes crucial.
It's the most important distinction.
Let's talk about doom scrolling on social media.
Perfect example. Walk me through it.
So if we are operating on the level of desire is all about absence, right? We desire what we don't have.
Correct.
You open the app because you desire connection or entertainment or knowledge. You are looking for a missing piece. But after an hour of scrolling, the desire is gone, your eyes hurt, you feel anxious, you are looking at terrible news, you are miserable.
Right. Reality is acting as an ugly obstacle to your happiness.
So logic dictates you should put the phone down.
But you don't.
You don't. You keep swiping. You are trapped in a loop. That is drive.
Mm.
Drive isn't about looking for something missing. Drive is about presence. Drive is the ugly, inescapable reality that is too close. It is that rotary motion, circling around a trauma or a toxic obstacle and getting a weird, perverse satisfaction, a jouissance out of the obstacle itself.
It's the pain becoming the pleasure.
Exactly. The pain of the doom scrolling becomes the pleasure. You are the trapped animal dashing against the cage.
That is a brilliant illustration. Desire wants to avoid the traumatic fixation. Desire keeps moving, looking for the next missing piece, the next shiny object in the symbolic order.
But drive just circles the drain.
Right. Drive is the persistence of the ground. Drive is the stubborn, repetitive loop that gets a horrifying pleasure and pain from the impact. Drive is the presence of the dark ground inside us, refusing to be civilized.
Man, so how does this chaotic divine abyss, this horrifying drive, link to the modern understanding of the human unconscious? Because usually when someone says the unconscious, we immediately think of Sigmund Freud. We picture a boiling cauldron deep in our minds, full of repressed dark urges, sexual desires, and violent instincts, just waiting to spill out into our conscious behavior.
And here's where Žižek points out a massive paradigm-shifting twist in Schelling's philosophy.
Let's hear it.
For Schelling, the unconscious is not that swirling vortex of blind drives.
Wait, what? That breaks the entire framework we just built. The chaotic, psychotic drives sound exactly like what the unconscious is supposed to be.
You would think so, but Schelling is much more precise. The true unconscious in this framework is the act of decision itself.
The act of decision.
The German word he uses is Entscheidung, which literally means a severing, a separation, or cutting away. The unconscious is not the chaotic stuff. The unconscious is the primordial act where God, and analogously the human subject, represses those chaotic drives into the past in order to open up linear time and create a stable reality.
Okay, I have to process that. The unconscious isn't the monster in the basement.
Yeah.
The unconscious is the act of turning the key to lock the basement door. And we don't remember turning the key.
Exactly. We do not have conscious access to the moment we made that foundational choice. You do not remember the moment you decided to repress the madness and enter the symbolic order of language and normalcy.
So how does that actually manifest in daily human life?
Yeah.
Because it sounds very theoretical.
Let's connect it to modern existentialism. Think about Jean-Paul Sartre or Martin Heidegger. Existentialists argue that we are thrown into the world and we make a fundamental choice about who we are.
We choose our character.
Right, our fundamental project in life. But if you ask a person, when exactly did you choose to be an anxious overachiever? Or when did you choose to be someone who constantly deflects with humor? They can't tell you.
They can't pinpoint the date and time.
They just wake up inside of that reality. They find themselves already acting out the choice. That choice of character is the true unconscious act.
Imagine waking up inside a house. You have the keys in your pocket, your name is on the mortgage, your furniture is in the living room. But you have absolutely no memory of buying the house, signing the papers, or moving in.
That's horrifying, but perfectly accurate.
You are trapped by a foundational choice you don't remember making. That is what it feels like to be alienated from your own Entscheidung.
That alienation is the core of modern subjective drive. And Žižek takes this framework, this idea of a subject alienated from their own founding act, alienated from the dark machinery of their own bodily drives, and extrapolates it in a wild, highly relevant direction.
Where does he take it?
Cyberspace and virtual reality.
Which feels like a massive leap. I mean, how does an 1813 manuscript about God's anxiety predict the metaverse?
It all comes down to coordination and mediation. Think about how your mind and body coordinate. When you consciously decide to raise your hand, your physical hand goes up. It feels seamless. But in the 17th century, a philosopher named Nicolas Malebranche looked at this and said, wait, how does an immaterial thought actually move physical matter?
It's the classic mind-body problem.
Right. So he proposed a theory called occasionalism.
Let's explain occasionalism clearly for everyone.
Occasionalism argues that your mind and your body cannot actually interact directly. They are two totally different substances.
So how do I move my arm?
When you want to move your arm, you aren't moving it. You merely provide the occasion or the desire. God acts as the invisible intermediary coordinating your mental desire with the physical world. You will it, and God moves the arm for you instantly.
It's like typing on a keyboard. When I press the letter A, my finger doesn't physically reach into the screen and draw the letter.
Right.
I press a piece of plastic, and a hidden intermediary, the microchips, the code, the motherboard, translates my physical action into a digital pixel. The computer is coordinating the reality.
That is the perfect modern equivalent. And in virtual reality, Žižek argues, the computer becomes God in the exact Malebranchian sense.
Oh, I see where this is going.
When you put on a VR headset and you move your avatar's hand to pick up a digital apple, the computer is the massive, hidden other coordinating your physical input with the digital output.
The code is the invisible intermediary.
Yes. But this mediatization of our bodies, this reliance on an external machine to coordinate our reality, subtly strips us of power. Žižek calls this a radical proletarianization of the subject.
We're separated from the means of producing our own reality.
Exactly. We become deeply vulnerable. Because what happens if the computer runs amok? What happens if the code glitches, or if the algorithm decides to change the rules of physics while you are immersed?
It generates immense paranoia.
It evokes deep psychotic fantasies. Žižek brings up the famous psychoanalytic case of Daniel Paul Schreber, a German judge in the late 1800s who suffered from severe schizophrenia. Schreber hallucinated a wired universe where God was directly manipulating his nerves through divine rays. He felt his bodily autonomy was being controlled by an external machine.
And Žižek thinks that's happening to us.
Žižek warns that cyberspace threatens to materialize that exact psychosis. As we integrate more with digital environments, we become terrified that our deepest drives and actions are being manipulated by a machine-like other.
Because in VR, or honestly in any highly algorithmic digital space, the ground, the hidden dark machinery running the simulation is completely out of our control.
We don't have access to the code.
Right. The rotary motion, the raw processing power belongs to the server farm, not to us. We are just the ethereal surface, the existence, the light of reason, floating blindly on top of a dark, impenetrable algorithm that we don't understand.
The algorithm is the modern ground. It is the dense contractive force making the digital reality possible, but it is alienated from us.
Man, it is a stunning synthesis. Žižek takes this obscure 19th century theology and makes it feel incredibly urgent for anyone using a smartphone today.
It's what he does best.
But I have to push back again.
Let's hear it.
Because as brilliant as this is, I feel like Žižek is forcing the puzzle pieces to fit together a bit too neatly. We need to step back and critique the source material directly here, specifically Žižek's handling of Schelling.
That is a completely fair move. Where do you see the friction in Žižek's argument?
Well, the inherent flaw in Žižek's approach is that he subordinates Schelling entirely to Jacques Lacan. He reads this deeply theological, cosmological text, a text about the literal creation of the universe, the nature of evil, and the agony of God, as if it were just a clever prefiguration of 20th century psychoanalysis.
He's reverse engineering it.
Right. By doing that, doesn't he completely strip away the genuine religious mystery? He turns the creator of the universe into a mere metaphor for human psychological trauma.
You are hitting on the central tension of Žižek's entire philosophical project, and it is a highly valid critique. Žižek is a materialist.
So he doesn't care about the theology.
He treats the theological dimension of Schelling as a kind of myth, a narrative shell that can be translated into the structural logic of psychoanalysis without leaving any remainder. For Žižek, when Schelling talks about God's rotary drives, it is just a roundabout 19th century way of talking about the human death drive.
But don't we leave something vital when we do that? When we reduce God's agonizing literal birth of the universe, the emergence of time itself out of eternity, into just a fancy metaphor for how a human toddler acquires language and neurosis.
It's a reduction, for sure.
It feels like it severely flattens the cosmic ambition of what Schelling was actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Schelling actually believed he was mapping out the architecture of God.
He absolutely did. Schelling was trying to explain the ontological architecture of all reality, from the cosmos down to the dirt, not just the architecture of the human mind.
Right.
And while the Lacanian reading is undeniably brilliant for understanding human subjectivity and neurosis and the anxieties of virtual reality, you are right that it secularizes and shrinks Schelling's scope. By pulling everything entirely into the realm of the human subject, Žižek is arguably guilty of a kind of anthropocentric hubris.
He takes a theory about the universe and makes it entirely about us.
Exactly.
We take God's trauma and use it to explain why we spend too much time on our phones. It feels a bit narcissistic.
It does. But paradoxically, that anthropocentric shift might be exactly what makes Žižek's reading so compelling and necessary for a modern audience.
Oh, so?
We no longer naturally think in terms of grand theological cosmologies. That isn't our baseline anymore.
Sure.
But we do think in terms of anxiety, neurosis, screen time, and the feeling of being trapped by our own destructive drives. Žižek translates Schelling into the only language modern society truly understands fluently, the language of psychological distress.
Okay, that makes sense. Which brings us to the ultimate question of application.
The so what of it all.
Exactly. We have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. We started with God's agonizing internal split between existence, the expansive light of reason, and the ground, the dark, heavy, impenetrable friction.
We watched as that tension locked God into the terrifying rotary motion of drives.
The trapped animal redlining in neutral, tearing itself apart in cosmic anxiety.
And we saw how the pronunciation of the word broke that cycle, repressing the chaotic madness into the unconscious past, a dynamic that Žižek maps onto the psychoanalytic birth of human neurosis and the night of the world.
And we explored how that unconscious act of choice, the Entscheidung, echoes all the way into modern existentialism and our deep paranoid anxieties about cyberspace and algorithmic control.
It's quite a journey.
But I want to tie this directly back to you, the listener. When you face an everyday moral struggle, when you are paralyzed by a creative block, when you feel the heavy, ugly weight of reality pushing against your desires, you are not just experiencing a personal psychological quirk.
No, you're tapping into something much older.
Your neurosis is not a mistake. You are experiencing echoes of the very foundation of reality. You are feeling the divine friction that makes existence possible.
And if we follow Žižek's psychoanalytic journey to its absolute conclusion, we have to ask, is there a cure?
I was hoping you'd say yes.
If neurosis is our default state, what happens when a person actually completes psychoanalysis? When they pass beyond the symbolic law, when they stop relying on the structures of normalcy and transition fully from desire to drive?
What does that end state look like? Does the anxiety stop?
Žižek argues that the end goal is to become what he calls the saint.
The saint.
Yes. The saint is someone who undergoes subjective destitution. This means they stop caring entirely about what the other wants from them. They stop trying to find a guarantee for their existence in the desires of society or their parents or their boss or even God.
They stop looking for the missing piece that desire promises.
Exactly. They fully accept the chaos, the ground. They accept that there is no deeper hidden meaning to their existence to be uncovered. And in doing so, they offer a silent, radical yes to the universe. They embrace the drive without the anxiety. They accept the rotary motion not as a trap to escape, but as the raw engine of their own being.
So in a world that is constantly driven by desire, constantly exhausted by the demands of others, endlessly caught in the agonizing rotary motion of trying to be what everyone else wants, what would it actually look like in your life to embody that silent, radical acceptance?
To stop pulling against the snare like a trapped animal.
Exactly. To just offer a radical yes to the friction of reality. It's something to mull over today. Because even a perfectly smooth mathematical sphere of light might look peaceful, but without the dark, heavy friction of the ground, you can't build a single thing on it.